Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about monoliths. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, would you say that most companies are better off building componentized monoliths that they can break off into independent services later if there is a reason to do so, since bigger single machines are available for a reasonable cost these days? Oh yes, dear Lord, yes. I would say that the the way, if you were to ask me, Frederick, considering all things, what is the golden bullet, like the silver bullet architecture, the thing that everybody should be doing, it is this thing. So to me, the biggest mistake I see, quite like all over the place, it was the worst thing that happened, in my opinion, to our industry, was the idea of microservices. I'm not trashing the architecture because there is a use case for it. The problem was that this is my argument at the very least. The problem was that people associated monoliths and like messy code and spaghetti code and like all of these different various dependencies and stuff like that, and the solution to that problem with microservices. That's what they did. Like the idea became that if you have a monolith, that's a bad thing because that leads to spaghetti code, and the way to solve that is microservices. And I argue that that is not so. The trick to creating a scalable monolith is the thing you're talking about. It is about understanding how to segment a monolithic application and the ownership of that monolithic application in such a way that you have because this is the thing I argue, guys. A microservice, if you think about your source code, every single source that you write, like all the systems, will have various entities such as users, product, orders, things like that, right? The problem with this traditional MVC pattern that people, it's the same thing I tell people when I see model view controller and so forth and so on. What you're doing is that you are creating one single box. That's your monolith, a single box that contains all these different entities and these different concepts, and you spread them across the whole project due to the fact that you're structuring things in that way. A microservice, in conceptually now, is the idea that you take, let's say, all the things that has to do with a user and you put that in a service. And all I tell you is, can you please do exactly that thing, but instead of moving it to a separate service and a separate repo somewhere else, just create a folder. Create a user folder, and in that user folder you put your database connections, your DAOs, your repos, whatever you have, your services that are associated with the user, the endpoint control, like the controllers that have the endpoints and stuff like that, and then you just expose that interface toward, like, usually most of that stuff is self-encapsulating, so it doesn't actually have to live outside of the thing, and all you really need now is a single entry point file, your program CS, your Java main method, like your whatever, like your application file, that all it has to do is to act as the entry point to the system. It literally just starts the server and imports all the controller endpoints and just adds them. Like line by line. That architecture will scale to basically any size of company. The only time that does not work, as at least on what I've found, is if you literally have so much load on the system that a monolith won't do. And for a fresh greenfield product or anything besides, we're talking like high load types of situations, this will work. And as you were saying, if you do have the need to go to microservices, you don't even have to go microservices. You can take, let's say one of those services becomes very heavy, like let's say for the sake of argument that there's a lot of workload on that specific service and you don't want to scale up with another VM and like so forth and so forth. You want to just break it out into a microservice or something separate, or a SOA architecture, call it whatever you want. You literally just have to copy paste that folder that has all, like the module, like you call it the component, I call it the module. The module that is associated with the endpoints that are exposed in for order to do whatever it's supposed to do, put that in a separate service now. That's all you have to do. And then you can wire up the connections between the different services and so forth. That is I argue, that is the organic way of going from a monolith, which is at small scale. I still argue that it's the best thing you can. On your first day, don't do microservices because it's just a lot of extra overhead that doesn't give you much, because you don't really have any issue. Like, at the end of the day, guys, The thing that I just told you, that is how microservices work. The only difference is that you are connecting to various services instead of in the same repository within the same code base. You are doing it over a network instead. So you might have multiple databases with multiple services and different APIs, but they're still doing the calls to this external service that does some logic and returns a result set. That's exactly how all your methods, your classes, your functions, like that's how what they all are doing. It's just that it's all in the same system instead of being in multiple systems. And that's why I'm saying that if you're trying to solve the problem of spaghetti code, do this, because this is a better next step for you. It's a better scaling system than going directly to microservices, where you, as I said, you're basically you're getting more than you're really looking for, because solving spaghetti code is in my opinion it's a simpler problem than what microservices is giving you. The thing what I tell people when it comes to microservices is, as I said, if you have a need to separate your computations or things like that, where you literally can't, you don't want to just increase the scale of one single VM or one single server, it's a perfect use case. It's a perfect use case for that. But for a standard application, I can go as far as to say that what I usually recommend, it is literally to just follow that easy pattern, and so far I've never seen it fail. This will be, at my current job, this will be the third time I have quote unquote magically solved the problems of legacy code and there's so much spaghetti code and we don't really know what's going on. The repo is so messy. It will be the third time in my career now, in about the last 5-ish 4 years, something like that, where all I have literally gone to a code base such as what you're describing. It's just a gigantic monolith with all the different the code is all over the place, and it takes forever to learn it because everything is just spread across the place. So onboarding is a pain and all this sort of stuff. And all I do is that I go and look at, okay, so which are the endpoints? Okay, here are all the endpoints. Let's try to logically segment them, because they are 90% of your modules are going to be in the damn URL. It's going to be API/user, API/product, API/order, API whatever, and then you create a module. And then you move all of the code that is associated with that controller into that, and basically you create the monorepo. That's all you have to do, and that's still. And then there's one. I usually go with one shared folder, and that is the place where I put all the things where I don't know exactly where it's hard to tell. It's not going to fit in any one of the modules. It might be a dependency between multiple modules, and so temporarily I dump it in there so that I get a very easy dependency tree, because now instead of depending on things back and forth, I'm trying to move all the shared dependencies to a central location and then figure out, can I move that down to the application or the modules in some fashion. And that means that I get a very, very easy to work with dependency graph for all the different services that I have within the system. And the onboarding for the teams and the people who are working, it's super, super easy, because if you have 30 different modules that do, or 30 different endpoint collections, so to speak, what I usually tell teams is that if you are all working on the same monorepo, if you want to make it even a little bit more digestible, just take another folder, create a team folder, like your team's name, and put the modules that you are responsible for into that module. Or you create another layer, which is your team module, and then you have a certain set of APIs or endpoints that you own, and then you use something like code owners or something like that to do similar things that what you do in open source, where people can make a pull request to your specific part of the code. It's just that you have to approve it as the main team and the main stakeholder. This makes onboarding a breeze, because the box of what you need to learn is now much more narrow and specific to your specific team, and the area of ownership becomes a lot easier. And as I said, if a team goes away and you have to move a module, you're literally just copy pasting a folder to another folder. That's all you're doing. And if you want to split it into microservices, as I said, again, you're literally just copy pasting a folder and putting another application startup server somewhere in whatever you're doing, right? So what I want you to take away from this is that, yes, good God, yes. If there's any tip I can give to the average company, it is to don't make things more complicated than they need to be. Understand when one thing is a good thing and when another thing is a better thing. Like this trend that came that sort of made monoliths the bad architecture, and microservices is the thing that everybody who's serious about software development does. I think it was the biggest. Like it's the worst thing I've ever seen. It's the same thing. I feel exactly the same way about CSS in JS, where like you 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 claim that it solves a problem that you have with just say plain old CSS, but the reality is that you just trade some problems for other problems, and when you think about it, there were solutions to these issues that you probably just didn't know about, and so you reach for a solution that you don't fully understand the consequences of. I argue, because I've never seen it always goes the same way. Microservices turns into just a distributed monolith when it's in the hands of people who don't really know what the fuck they're doing. And what I'm saying is that if you're not clever enough to figure out that to solve the spaghetti code and ownership problem in a small application, that having that as easy as just doing the thing you do with your NuGet packages, your like in the Maven repos or npm packages, whatever. Literally what they are doing, they're just creating a package that holds the stuff that you depend on and exposes that from the folder. If you're not clever enough to figure out that you can do exactly the same thing, you don't have to have a view, a model, and a service folder, and then have everything in just a big mess. You can do the same type of segmentation. Well, then I'm pretty sure that you're going to do something equally unwise with microservices. So start by moving your monolith into segmented modules. As I said, 90% of the time it is as easy as just looking at the URLs of all your different endpoints and seeing that the nouns that you are using to describe your different areas of the API, just create a folder for it, move all the code there, and expose the controllers and the services and so forth, and then have a shared folder for the stuff that you don't really know exactly where it's going to go until you know better. Have a great day.